Hi, I'm Ben Doan, the Full Snack Tester. You can find me on Twitter and fullsnacktester.com. Environment variables. Today I want to talk to you about how you can use environment variables to configure services to your advantage. Environment variables sit outside a process and are passed in on initialization. They are key value pairs set at an OS level or in some kind of isolated environment, such as a container using Docker, or for example, in Netlify, you can do this passing environment variables in at build time. Same with Heroku and many other systems, such as those configured on AWS or the cloud services. Many different methods exist for storing and passing in environment variables, either via something like Docker Compose using the YAML files, .env files that can be passed into many applications, including node-based applications using the .env npm library. They can be exported through the operating system, either on a user scope or globally available. Most programming languages can read environment variables in using some type of built-in method that queries the process that has been run and how it's been launched and extracts the environment variables, or using some kind of additional library or module. So why should you care? Well, you can use environment variables to configure a system, and you can configure the system to your advantage for testing. Think for a moment about how environment variables could be useful for you. First of all, you have to find them. So if you look in your documentation for your system, you might get lucky. And sometimes the common environment variables for a system will be documented by your devs. If not, you can speak to your devs and understand what options are available. Depending on the different options are available, you can use these to your advantage in different ways. One of the ways you can use these is to help exploration or for automation. For example, you could identify some kind of variable that's being passed into your system by environment variables and think about boundary conditions on these variables being passed in. Or maybe your service allows you to configure a database. You could use this in many different ways. For example, you could make it point to a database that has some particular test data set available for you, or you could use it so that you can capture all the queries going into the database and maybe, replay them for testing later, or many other different ways you could use this to your advantage, perhaps for security testing or all sorts of other things. What about, for example, if your service actually configures a URL to communicate with another API? For example, I don't know, MetaWeather API. If instead of configuring your service to go to the real external MetaWeather API, you configured it instead to go to a mock system configured in something like Postman or Insomnia or any of the other, systems that exist for mocking APIs, you could actually use this to test your system, integrate with a service before your service, is live with that integration. Or you could create your own system to actually just simply capture the call going to these other systems and then decide on, did we send the right calls? How do we want to respond? You could use this to explore all sorts of different ways to test your system. So in summary, environment variables are key value pairs that allow you to configure your system and pass them in. You can discover env files through documentation or speaking to your devs. You can use them to make changes to the config and the odds in your favor. What do I mean by stacking the odds in your favor? Well, this gives you the edge when you can configure the system however you want. You could direct a service to connect to a mock API or a test database. Go learn about how you can test using variable config in your app. I'm sure you can find many creative ways to do this, and I'd be really interested to find out if you've used this to your advantage and what different creative things you've come up with. There are a whole list of resources here that you can learn more about environment variables. For example, how to configure these things in Docker, how to use them in Java, in JavaScript, in Node, Netlify, Heroku, or in popular systems for infrastructure as code such as Terraform. There really are lots of ways you can use this. So be creative. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll catch you again.